Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been wounded in what the FBI is calling an assassination attempt. He was on the campaign trail in the town of Butler, Pennsylvania, addressing a crowd at an open-air rally when gunshots rang out. The Secret Service says the shooter opened fire from the roof of a nearby building. The suspect was less than 150 meters from the stage on which Trump was speaking. The FBI is leading the investigation into the incident.
This is the moment former U.S. President Donald Trump was shot at a rally in Pennsylvania.
Take a look at what happened.
A bullet grazes his right ear. Secret Service agents form a shield around him. Trump rises. He shouts, "Fight, fight," to his supporters before being taken to safety. The FBI says it was an assassination attempt. A spectator was shot in the head and died instantly, according to an eyewitness. 2 other people were hit and are in critical condition. After the shooting, Trump posted this on his social media platform. "I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong. I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening." A witness told BBC News that he saw the suspect and informed law enforcement moments before he pulled the trigger.
We noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle.
A rifle.
We could clearly see him with a rifle, absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, "Hey man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle." And the police were like, "Huh, what?" Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, "Hey, right here on the roof, we can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling." And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
Authorities killed the suspect, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew C. He was a registered Republican from Pennsylvania. The Secret Service is under pressure to explain what led to this major security breach. Trump was targeted just days before he'll be confirmed as the Republican presidential nominee. An election year that was already turbulent has now taken a dark turn in America.
Our very own Janelle Dumoulin joins us from Washington. Janelle, bring us up to date.
Indeed, as you said there, Ben, this is an ongoing investigation by the FBI and several cooperating agencies. They are going through every bit of evidence, combing through every second of eyewitness accounts, combing through endless hours of footage. But of course, as the dust settles and the shock subsides somewhat, a full half day after this incident occurred, the question coalescing in everyone's minds here in Washington is how this could have happened in such a high security situation. Now, the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability said it would launch its own probe into the matter and has summoned the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, to testify before them at a hearing on July 22. And indeed, a lot of these questions are going to have to be answered by the Secret Service. Earlier today, there was a briefing by the FBI in order to get reporters and the media up to speed on what was happening, and they said the things that are well established by now. that we are talking about a shooter who managed to place himself on a low roof outside the event, but one that was where he was able to have a direct line of sight towards the former President Donald Trump. But the Secret Service was not represented at that briefing, but a lot of the questions that were being directed at them, they were having to refer again to the Secret Service. For example, how was it possible that he got so close? How was it possible that he got in multiple rounds before the threat was neutralized, as they say in their language? So this is definitely going to be something that many are going to be watching out for, what the response of the Secret Service is going to be, what kind of security failures there were, if any, and how this all came to pass.
And apart from all those details you've listed, what more do we know about the shooter?
Indeed. So Thomas Mathisi, he is a 20-year-old from Bethel Park. That is a suburb in western Pennsylvania. It's a suburb that is about 1 hour's drive away from Butler, Pennsylvania, which of course is where this rally took place and where this attempted assassination against former President Donald Trump took place. Now, he is a registered Republican, although records show that he has donated before to Democrat-led causes. He's thought to have no criminal record. He had no ID on him at the time. He was being identified, so he was identified through other means, through DNA testing, through biometric records. Now, in the FBI statement that was released about him, there wasn't so much more detail apart from that, but rather, once again, that it's a reminder that this is an active investigation and the FBI is asking anyone who has any information to come forward at this stage.
DW correspondent Janelle Dumaloan. Let's hear now from some other eyewitnesses to the shooting.
Sounded like there were fireworks, and everybody kind of hesitated, like, what's happening? Before Trump, like, swatted his ear, you could see that he actually had that in, he dropped, and that's when everybody had the initial reaction to drop to the ground, and it was just like people were just on top of each other. Like she was getting buried.
Like jumped on top of her.
And so it was crazy.
I heard the shots. I thought it was firecrackers to begin with. Somebody over there was screaming, he's been shot, he's been shot. So I made my way over. I said, I'm an emergency department physician. Let me help you. The guy had spun around, was jammed between the benches. He had a headshot here. There was lots of blood, and he had brain matter.
US President Joe Biden has condemned the apparent assassination attempt against Trump. Let's listen in to some of his remarks.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this. But the bottom line is that the Trump rally was a rally that he should have been able to be conducted peacefully without any problem. But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. And everybody must condemn it. Everybody.
Let's bring in William Glucroft, a former colleague of mine, also deputy editor of the Parliament magazine that deals with EU politics. He joins us from Brussels. We heard President Biden there. William, what sort of political climate in the US has led to what we can now call an attempt on Trump's life?
Well, unfortunately, Biden's statement there is rather aspirational. And this is something we've heard a lot from Joe Biden and his previous Democratic predecessor in the White House, Barack Obama, where they tried to always, aspire to the better side of the United States. But of course, American history is full of violence, political violence and otherwise. We know that it's a violent country with massive amounts of guns and gun violence and a long history of vigilante violence and targeting political leaders and political officials, especially firebrands like Donald Trump, I think could broadly be categorized as. So as much as Joe Biden, I think, is trying to elevate the conversation and speak to one's better angels, so to speak. This is not unprecedented. He said that there's no place in America for this, but unfortunately there is.
What does this mean then for Trump's campaign?
We're going to have to see going ahead, of course. I mean, already we've heard from the Trump campaign and the Republican Party that the upcoming national convention for them will be going on as scheduled. He will be attending, and he will almost certainly be nominated as the candidate for the Republican Party. But if we, past this prologue, American culture loves this sort of heroic figure, and those images that we were seeing of Donald Trump getting up and the fist bump are going to be iconic and are going to come to define him and his persona in the political spectrum. And I think that is going to be leaned really deeply into in these weeks ahead. Every time there's a big development in a campaign, we always ask, how long are we going to remember this? And the answer basically always is, well, until the next big development. We were just talking about the Joe Biden's debate performance, and how long are we going to be talking about that? Well, now we have this to talk about. And I think the Republicans and Donald Trump are going to lean very heavily into it.
The Republicans, of course, are known for being anti-gun control. How are they responding to this?
This is something I am really fascinated in watching. I mean, allegedly this suspect had an AR-15. An AR-15 is an iconic rifle for the gun rights movement, for people who want to have less gun control and more ability for individuals to have guns. We have a long history. It seems like not a week goes by where a legally purchased gun is used by someone without a criminal record to shoot people, whether it's at a school, whether it's in a public place, or now in this case in a political setting. There's just so many incidences like this, and Republicans and Donald Trump specifically go very hard on people's right to be able to do that. Maybe not to shoot people, but the right to be able to have those weapons. And then things like this happen. So it's going to be interesting how Republicans walk this line, and if people hold them accountable for essentially creating or helping create a situation where this is possible, right? Where their own candidate is the target of the policies that they have advocated for decades. That could become a weakness for them. But again, if past this prologue, to use that expression again, Republicans are very good on messaging and very good at basically saying the answer to guns is more guns. That's always been sort of their line, and we can probably expect more of that to come.
Yeah, I think you said it there. Another thing, the Secret Service is under intense scrutiny.
Indeed, when I watched that video, I was shocked as just a layman, who has watched his share of Secret Service videos and their tactics and their strategies, and they have plans in place for what is supposed to happen when these things happen. How a gunman got on top of a roof just a few hundred feet away from the former president and possibly would-be president again is mind-boggling to me, and how they got him off the stage is mind-boggling to me. These are things that, as we just heard from Janelle, are going to be under intense investigation moving forward. We heard that long soundbite in the report earlier from the eyewitness warning for minutes, there's a gunman. So Secret Service action here is going to be the most under scrutiny. And then allowing Donald Trump to sort of give that fist bump and expose himself, make himself a target, or possibly when there was still an active threat. All of these things were just big questions to me that I, of course, don't have answers to, but are going to be central questions in the investigation going forward.
Journalist William Glucroft, thank you for your analysis.
And reactions to the shooting are coming in from around the world, with leaders expressing condemnation and offering sympathy. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has condemned what he called an act of political violence and wished Donald Trump a speedy recovery. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer responded to what he called shocking scenes, saying political violence in any form has no place in our societies, and my thoughts are with the victims of this attack. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky issued a statement speaking of his relief that Trump is now safe and saying he hopes America emerges stronger from this. Let's listen in.
An attempt on the life of Donald Trump, a terrible crime that can only be condemned and which demonstrates how serious the challenges to democracy are globally. Violence in any form and anywhere must absolutely not prevail. I'm confident America will rise to the challenge. I wish Mr. Trump a speedy recovery, strength and support to all those affected. May every evil intention fail.
Let's get more on the European perspective on this attempted assassination, this apparent attempted assassination. Joining us now are correspondents Matthew Moore in Berlin, Lisa Louis in Paris, and Jack Parrock in Brussels. Let me start with you, Matthew. Tell us about the political reactions here in Germany.
Yeah, we've been getting quite a lot of reaction this morning, Namisha. Mostly, it must be said, on Twitter or X. The Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, tweeted and he called the attack despicable. He said such acts of violence threaten democracy. The Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, has also voiced her condemnation of the incident, saying it had deeply shocked her. And she said violence must never become a means of political conflict. And that's basically the message that we're getting from senior politicians, that they're shocked and they're appalled and they think that political violence should never be the answer. And it's interesting that the leader of the opposition, Friedrich Merz, said that he thinks that it will further poison this campaign, is how he described the attack. So a mix, really, of voices that have been giving their reaction to this incident this morning.
And of course, here in Germany, there are concerns about violence against politicians too. But let me go over to Lisa in Paris. Lisa, what are French politicians there saying?
Well, French President Emmanuel Macron has said that this was a tragedy to our democracies. We also heard from the far-right National Rally with its president, Jordan Bardella, saying that violence was a poison to democracy. And former presidential candidate Marine Le Pen saying that this was a dramatic symbol of the violence that is undermining democracy. Now, this comes to the backdrop of France's national holiday, Bastille Day, that is celebrated over the course of this weekend here in France, across the country, with 130,000 police and security personnel deployed across the country. The Interior Minister announced that a minor, had been arrested in Angers in western France, and that person was believed to have been planning a violent attack during the events this weekend. So the country is on edge, also looking ahead to the Olympic Summer Games that will be happening here in about 2 weeks' time, with again tens of thousands of police officers and security personnel deployed during the events each day. France is on edge, and obviously this attack brings back painful memories of terror attacks that have been on numerous occasions happening here in France over the past decade.
So concerns along both sides of the political spectrum, as well as about security in Europe, like you said, Lisa. But I want to bring Jack in now. In Brussels, is there been an official EU reaction that echoes what we're hearing from Paris and Berlin here?
Yeah, it really has been echoing what Matthew and what Lisa has been saying. We heard from the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, saying that she's deeply shocked that political violence has no place in democracy. And she also sent condolences to the innocent victim that was shot as part of the incident in the United States. The outgoing president of the European Council, Charles Michel, said that political violence is absolutely unacceptable in democracy, strongly condemned the attack. And interestingly, the statement from the foreign policy chief of the European Union, also outgoing, Joseph Borrell, he said that once again we're witnessing unacceptable acts of violence against political representatives. So a similar sort of message as we've seen across the capitals of the European Union, here in the institutional heads as well.
And what about the reaction from politicians who are closer to Trump, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, this is the interesting part of this. We've had a number of different reactions from leaders and politicians in the European Union and indeed Europe. For instance, the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, he tweeted or used X to say, "My thoughts and prayers are with Trump in these dark hours." Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, she released a statement which said that she hopes the next few months of the electoral campaign will see dialogue and responsibility prevail over violence and hatred. And now Nigel Farage, the British politician that was very prominent at the same time in 2016 as when Donald Trump won the presidency due to his campaign to pull the United Kingdom out of the European Union, he released a statement saying the narrative of hatred against his friend Trump is what's responsible for this. And he said that the media is and the left-wing politicians are responsible for it, and he hopes that they are happy with themselves. A very strong statement from Nigel Farage in the United Kingdom. People that feel close to Donald Trump, I think, would say that they feel that attack is not only an attack on him, but also an attack on the values that they themselves also support.
Thank you for that. Matthew Moore in Berlin, Lisa Louis in Paris, and Jack Parrock in Brussels. Let's head back to the scene in Pennsylvania for a moment and hear from a reporter from the Associated Press news agency who witnessed the attack on Donald Trump and captured the iconic image behind me. Evan Vucci has spent years covering the former U.S. president and gave his account of what happened at the rally.
So today I was photographing former President Trump at a campaign rally here in Butler, Pennsylvania. I was right in front of the stage, directly in front of the stage. It was a normal rally. I've done it hundreds of times. And over my left shoulder, I heard several pops, and I knew immediately it was gunfire. So I looked at the stage and I saw the Secret Service agents rushing to President Trump. From that moment, I ran to the stage and I started photographing the agents on top of them. And then off to my right, I saw the Secret Service counter-assault team arrive. And then I ran to the other side of the stage and they picked President Trump up. And then as he's walking down the ramp, he started fist bumping to the crowd and waving. And I did notice he had blood coming down his face, as you can see in the photos. The agents took him down the ramp and they put him into an SUV. And again, as he was getting into the SUV, he also started pumping his fist again. I'm not sure how long it was from beginning to end, but in my mind, it all happened really fast. At the moment I heard the shots being fired, I knew that this was a moment in American history that had to be documented. I mean, it's our job as journalists to do this work.
A dramatic description there, and let's get some analysis on it from Stormy-Annika Mildner. She is the director of the Aspen Institute in Germany, a US-American think tank. Ms. Mildner, welcome to DW. We know that this is a divisive presidential campaign, to say the least, and we have the photojournalist there describing what he calls an iconic moment in the history of the US. How do you expect the shooting to impact the course of this election?
Well, first of all, this terrible incident happened in a situation in which the United States is already so deeply divided, and the situation is already very tense. So one of the big risks right now is, as we also heard from the other reporters, is that the situation gets even more heated, and that there will be more violence on the streets and at other campaign rallies. And a lot will depend on how Trump is going to handle the situation. And as we saw in the pictures right now, when just after the shooting and he raised his fist and he said, "Fight, fight," I just cannot see that he will try to calm down the situation, calm down his voters, but rather that he will utilize this incident to further mobilize his voters, just as he has also done around January 6th. Although this would be the moment for the country to come together, this would be the moment for Trump and Biden to stand up together on the stage and call against violence and call the country to come together. But I'm afraid that this is probably not going to happen.
You know, that's interesting what you say about the country needing to come together, both the Democrats and the Republicans, but that might not actually play out. But given the seeming advantage that you pointed out that this may bring to Trump, how can we expect the Democrats to respond now? What can their political strategy be?
So this is a difficult situation for Biden, because he is not just running in the campaign, I mean, as the next president, but he is also currently the president. And as a president, he needs to be presidential, and his job is to calm down the situation, to confidence and to call on everybody not to be violent and call against political violence. That's his job to do. At the same time, it's a difficulty for his campaign because he's under so much stress already after his TV debate with Trump, in which he didn't fare so well. There are a lot of calls on him to step down in the campaign. So what he would actually currently need to do is go after his opponent in an aggressive and open way. But this is not the situation in which he can do this. So he already pulled down campaign ads and he is not campaigning currently. And as a president, that is what he needs to do to calm the situation. But for his campaign, that's a tricky thing to do.
Absolutely. So a complex political situation here. But we also want to take a look at the security situation in the US. We know about the history of gun violence in that country. Doesn't this raise serious questions about the situation there?
Well, I think that the dividing lines are pretty clear. In the conservative camp, there is a clear belief that the carriage and ownership of guns is a right of every American. And on the more progressive side, there have been calls for a very long time for a more strict anti-gun legislation, or at least more legislation which reduces the risk of guns being in the wrong hands. And I think on both sides of the aisle, so to say, or in these two camps, the incident is just going to strengthen the positions and views which people already have. And that could also be viewed or witnessed after the school shootings in the past. So in the more conservative camp, people feel that the answer is not a restriction of ownership of guns, but rather to strengthen the security, maybe even giving teachers guns. And on the progressive side, it will strengthen the voices of those who say we really need to do something about gun violence. What I think will happen, though, is that there will be much more measures of security for the next campaign rallies. I think the Republicans will look at their security concepts for the party convention, which starts tomorrow, and around November 5th and 6th, and the days after the election. There will be a lot of thoughts into more sound security concepts. I think that is definitely going to happen.
I want to briefly ask you that you focus on transatlantic relations. How concerned is Europe about political stability in the US right now?
I think Europe is very concerned, and we also heard that in the statements of your journalists from the different capitals in Europe. The United States is just such an important ally and partner for Europe and also for Germany specifically, both in economic terms but also in political terms. And looking at what is happening on our continent with Russia's threat to Europe, with Russia's aggression and war against Ukraine, the transatlantic partnership is more important than ever. So a politically stable and sound and reliable and predictable partner is that what the EU really needs right now. Right. So a lot of politicians are worried looking across the Atlantic.
Absolutely. Stormy-Annika Mildner, director of the Aspen Institute in Germany. Thank you so much for that analysis.
Thank you so much for having me.